Hello, everyone. This is your host, Shanul Malik, welcoming you to News Now, Belmont Community News and Journal Update. Today, we have with us Superintendent John Phelan joining us and discussing with us a range of topics that will be of interest to the school community and the Belmont community at large. Welcome, John. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here, and thank you for having me.
So it's summer break. Kids are at home, hopefully enjoying ice creams and pool. But what does that mean for the superintendent of a public school like Belmont and the administration?
So the community should know that the Belmont Public School Administration works year-round. So we are absolutely preparing for September of 2021 with some of the professional development that we'll work on over the summer. As you know, the building committee is opening the 9 through 12 side of the brand new school on Concord Ave. So we spent a lot of time moving the high school furniture and belongings out of the school, coordinating that over the summer in preparation for the construction to be completed and ready for students in September of 2021. And we actually had a tour of the brand new building last Thursday with members of the building committee and a couple of school committee members. And I can tell you that it is just fantastic. So there's a lot of work going on. There's unique things that Belmont is taking on, like the building project for September. And then there's items that all districts are taking on, which is planning for what we hope to be a normal and regular school year for our students and staff, with some precautions, obviously, as well.
The last 1 year has been quite like any, very tumultuous, unprecedented. And what does that mean for a superintendent, and what has been your experience personally as a superintendent, as perhaps a parent?
I think as a superintendent, I'm going to use the next couple of weeks to reflect a little bit on the lessons learned over the last 15 months. And I can say that what I've learned throughout this process is that you cannot communicate enough. Listening and being present is important. Hearing feedback and seeking feedback from a lot of different folks is important. And being able to communicate in ways, not just at school committee meetings, that newsletters are good, but not enough. School committee meetings are good, but not enough. How can we create different tools to make sure people know what we're doing and why? And the challenge that we faced was we were facing ever changing guidelines and expectations. So when we thought we got it right, we then were asked to shift to the next mode and do the next thing. And that was part of the struggle of the year, was adapting. We basically opened school 3 different times in one school year with 3 different learning models. And I think it was a very, very hard year for the parents, especially, and the children especially, because they were left with the burden of working with us and in connection with us and partnering with us because their children were at home for part of the year, in a good part of the year. So the lessons learned are communicate, listen, and then communicate and listen again. And also, we have to all make decisions. And sometimes making decisions means that some folks will not be in agreement, but you try to keep your priorities of what's good for the students' health and safety and education, and also, of course, of the staff as well, that's the decision you have to make. So, but I'll be reflecting this summer to take some of the lessons learned and apply them to next year.
Yes, I mean, we are definitely in a better place right now than we were a year ago. So
Correct.
It's onwards and upwards for all of us, and which is wonderful. This year, the school community and the community at large had to grapple with some very upsetting behaviors, incidents that were related with homophobia, Asian hate, racial slurs. And a lot was talked about, a lot was published. And I'm wondering if we could hear directly from you, what were some of the facts about these incidents? And is there a notion where the pandemic may have led to some of these behaviors occurring more, or this is sort of pretty normal that might have happened before, or did indeed happen before the pandemic as well?
I think that these types of behaviors in the community or in all communities have happened in the past. And I think you only have to ask someone who that happened to, and they'll say that this happened 10 years ago, this happened 20 years ago, this happened 5 years ago. I think one of the things that the pandemic has done is it created a place where children came back to school after a long period of time not socializing and not being together. And I think a lot of those things, when they got mixed together, being back in the building, having these types of issues and incidents being discussed on the news in front of them daily, because we had a very concerning year of social unrest in the country. I think our children absorbed a lot of media, absorbed a lot of information, and they didn't know what to do with it. And so that might be why it played out in school maybe more differently than it did in the past. But we have worked with children through issues, whether it's related to, saying things that aren't nice or doing things that aren't nice to different folks for different reasons. That's part of what we always try to work with families and students on in schools. The issues that came up this year at the Chenery and at the high school, besides one, we have a pretty standard protocol that we use to make sure everybody's safe, make sure we communicate with the families of the students involved. If need be, contact the police. If need be, do safety assessments for families and children to make sure that they're safe and they can be back in school safely. And then talk about whatever kind of issues we want to move forward with that family in private, because we are talking about 13-year-olds or 14-year-olds. So consequences and post-event issues that involve restorative justice or any other kind of support that families need from students that did something that they regret or would want to do differently, that's left up to the school and the family. But I think that everybody should feel comfortable that their children are safe in school, that the school addresses these things when they hear about them or see them happen directly. And we have a great working relationship with the Belmont Police Department if those cases do rise to a potential level of needing their support. And what has changed over this last year or so is that we do have a group of adults from the community that we meet with that we call our cabinet, that represent the different groups in town, where we do talk with them more directly about what we're doing, ask for their feedback and their support. So we get the different lenses into each one of these incidents. We get the lens through the African American community. We get the lens through our Pan Asian Coalition community. We get the lens through the different communities. So we know, they know that our intentions are good, but sometimes even when you have good intentions, it doesn't land well. So we want to get their feedback to make sure that how we're addressing issues supports the members of the community. So that relationship has been developed, and we really we value the relationship with all those groups.
And I'm just curious as to, all this. I mean, Belmont is certainly a leader in making these measures, but I'm wondering, as a community, so that the onus is not just on the school, but community at large and parents, what could we do that leads to some very concrete steps? I know certain school systems are working more closely with CRT, the critical race theory, or DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit to that effect, or maybe something completely out of the box, some like a blue sky thinking that we might do that we've never thought of.
Sure. So prior to COVID and a lot of these events becoming so public and part of our immediate world, we've already been on a 3-year journey with a professional development group, Ideas, based in Lexington, that works with our staff. And we've been doing work on prejudice, racist behavior, how we work with staff in schools, working on marking the moment when something happens in front of a teacher. How do you support a student through that? How do you support a staff member when another adult makes a comment that you need to mark the moment? How do we create safe places for students and staff to go to school where they feel valued and welcome and known and heard and seen? And to your point, we might not know everything about the background of everybody, but the sheer, value that we have to place on everybody is respected and valued as a human first. And how lucky are we in Belmont that we have so many different backgrounds we can learn from and enjoy all the aspects of folks' culture and background in a town like Belmont. Very small town, but it's so much more diverse than I think people understand. So doing that work, we just had a full day of leadership professional development last Thursday. We brought in a gentleman to give us a full day of professional development on looking at all of our decision making through a race lens. So any decision that we make, whether it's for the student or a family or a curriculum or a disciplinary action, how do you walk that decision-making tree and then keep a race lens through that? So you're always mindful and proactively thinking about, is there anything that I'm thinking about or deciding here that I should look at differently, maybe reassess my assumptions, and then look at it through a lens of diversity in race, so we can make sure that we're, if we don't understand what we're doing next, that we want to look at it through the lens of who the family is going through and what their background is and how that could impact how we approach it, what we do, and how we work with families. So that's just one example of just last Thursday having the full leadership council, and that's been going on for about 4 more years. And luckily this year we were able to fund an audit. So we've already started our equity audit of the district. That's an independent group that will come in and look at the district through the lens of all users and stakeholders and find out where we're doing well as it relates to this work and where we're not doing well. And we also received funding from the school committee, despite not having an override, that we will be hiring, and just had the final interviews for our equity and inclusion position. So we hope to have that position on for next school year. So between the audit and the new position where someone will be accountable for the work, and also the body of work that we've done for the 4 years leading up to next year, we do think that we have some good foundational work done in the schools. And we also know that our children live in the community. They don't just live in the school. So we have to also branch out to the community as well. So we are trying to work on it from a school perspective. And prior to COVID, we had a lot of speaker series nights that we partnered with different communities with that I think were pretty well attended. But you know what? They're attended by the same people. We have to do a better job of reaching beyond the folks that already believe that these issues are important. Try to reach more folks who are, on the sidelines and pull them into this dialogue. Because I think that when we start to talk about, living next to each other, believing in folks and not passing judgment and in being respectful from the start, and that's your neighbor, seems to all make sense when you start to get people in the same room. And that's what we need to do a job of in every community, I think. And I think we have a lot of good people who want to do that in Belmont.
Yeah. So, I just food for thought. I'm wondering if there might be ways, whatever is coming out of these amazing initiatives that you and the school are taking, how that could be then shared with the community in a manner that is digestible and then can be executed on a daily basis. So
just to speak to that point, when we started this work 4 years ago, we had done a series of social emotional learning surveys to staff, students, and families. And adults. And so after doing those for a few years, that's where the data came from that really pushed us forward into wanting to go further into this work of equity and access in our schools, because we were getting data right from our own families and right from our own students that they didn't feel as comfortable as their peers in school. In some cases, their outcomes weren't as good academically. In some cases, they felt like they weren't valued or seen in school. So that was a set of data that we showed to the community, displayed to the community, and that was our rationale for moving it forward. So, when we start to think of what are some of the indicators of how we want to moving forward, I would probably leave that to our new director to come up with how they would want to have their work assessed and how we could, make sure the community could see, first of all, what does the audit say? What does it say that we need to think about differently? What does it say we're doing well? Then make some initiatives built through that audit about things that we want to improve on. And then through those initiatives would have to have some measurement tools. And it would be nice to be able to get some concrete tools or indicators that we could look at year to year to say, wow, Belmont went from X amount of incidents a year to X minus and X minus again. Or we had hoped to do this, we'd hoped to have better hiring over the next few years. And we went from X% of students of faculty of color or, non-white than we did 2 years ago. So we might want to create some real concrete measurements that we can go by. And I think that's the work that we'll take on over the next year.
Mm-hmm. And the diversity director that you're talking about, is that the same as a social worker? There was some conversation about hiring a social, or these are two different positions. And can you clarify what the roles might be, and are they at the high school level or the district-wide level?
Sure. So the equity and inclusion director will be a district-wide position that will report to the superintendent.
Okay.
They'll work K to 12 with all schools. and they'll support. We already have equity teams at every building, so they will be supporting each one of those equity teams in each school. We also have a district-wide equity team that they would be a part of and lead. We have a teachers group called BECA, Belmont Educators of Color and Allies. So we're trying to put all those groups together under the leadership of this new director, and they will do that work and they will lead that work. The social workers that we're asking for with federal funds, we're asking for them at the middle school and high school because we already have them at the elementary. Because we do want to help students proactively and families proactively deal with coming out of this COVID environment and walking back into whatever that next school year looks like. Some folks are walking back and feel pretty comfortable and everything's good, but there's more people than we think that are coming back with a little bit of concern, socially feel a little awkward, have not socialized in ways that they normally have. You can imagine that if you're 7 years old and in a year and a half of your 7 years has been spent in your home, school, that's a pretty big piece of your existence. So we'll need some supports in place for folks to talk to, work with, whether that's small group work with students, lunch groups with students, interacting with families, one-on-one support. And then we also have been working with McLean Hospital, and they've been doing consult sessions with our school administrators and our school social workers at the elementary level. So we'll take their expertise and apply it in our schools as well. So we hope to create a net of support for families for at least 1 year of this coming back to school after COVID.
And sort of in the same vein, but I'm shifting gears just a tad bit, but it sort of, I think, comes under the same umbrella, is the response that the school received after getting the summer reading list, especially at the elementary level. And there were complaints about the books that were chosen and what the books were, the messaging that they were sending. So 2 parts to the question. One is what's the process of choosing the list? And then how do we use that as a platform to create a welcoming environment while still conveying the facts?
Sure. So we have we work with the Belmont Public Library, and the librarians at the public library generate that list. They provide it to our literacy folks at the elementary and middle school level as part of the resources that we provide parents to choose from. None of those titles are mandatory. The resources. And the list is actually very similar to the one that we had last year. There's not very much of a change. And they do look at that through the alignment of culture, language, race, and ethnicity of students, make sure that students can see themselves in the books that they're reading. Culture can be seen in the books that they're reading. We try to make sure that they're age appropriate. But from K to 7, kindergarten through grade 7, these are all resources for parents to use and take advantage of at their own discretion. So we appreciate being partnered up with Belmont Public Library. Peter, the director, is a great guy. We do have some suggested readings for middle school and high school that are not connected with the library's list that has been in question. Our goal is that we have a very diverse community. We want our children to feel safe and welcome. We want them to learn about each other's cultures. We want them to be able to see themselves in the literature that they read, not only in the summer, but through the year. We've worked in some of our departments to already kind of, revamp our curriculum to make sure that the students can see their history and their work and their world and their culture that they do. And it's going to take some time to do that. So the summer reading list is an ongoing process where we remove titles, we add titles. We're thoughtful of what we think parents might want to know about and share with their children at their own discretion and provide them the access of the titles to do so. And so, this is not different from any other year. I think it's different from any other year because this has been an explosive topic for the last year and a half. And I think because the list went out last year during the summer of COVID, maybe it didn't catch as much attention. It's relatively the same types of issues and topics that we want parents to have access to so they can have conversations with their children at home. And we're just trying to provide that support. So we support the Belmont Public Library. We're thankful that they include us. We also have our separate list of for our high school students and some of our middle school students. But that's the process. And after the librarians meet with our literacy folks, we put the two lists together and we send them out to the public and we let them choose what they would like to do for the summer.
Continuing along the same vein, I'm wondering if you could talk about plans for academic loss recovery that some particular groups might have experienced, either grade-wise or elementary, middle, and high school-wise, or within that a specialized group as well. And what has been the assessment so far? Are there any specific groups that have been identified as having experienced an academic loss? And then what might be the plans of addressing those in preparation for the next school year?
Sure. So we're taking a lot of our guidance from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed. We all know that we have to move all of our children forward to the next grade because we're all together with some limited amount, or depending on the child, maybe less than normal. We have academic recovery services this summer at the Chenery School. It started today. We also have special education year-round services for students that started today, and as well as students who are our English language learners. So all that work started today. Some of it happens at the Winbrook, but most is happening at the middle school. Those students were identified by their classroom teachers and principals and literacy folks at the elementary level as in need of certain recovery support. I think that maybe some folks maybe felt their child should be in that, and why didn't they get the call? We really tried to draw a certain type of academic loss and contact those families. And so that's happening right now. We're also working on a plan for next year with our federal dollars to not only hire social workers to support the social emotional recovery of children, but also what does the recovery look like? We have professional development, hopefully being funded for trauma-based instruction for students who come back after a year and a half of being out of school. There's also a program from DESE that involves tiered support for students in schools, which we already do in Belmont. It's RTI, response to intervention. We're looking to hire more response to intervention paraprofessionals to support that work of getting students, assessing what they need, and giving them that direct instruction in small groups. We're hoping to hire 2 math coaches, because one of the things that really is a hard thing to be to not have in front of you every day is math. And if we can get that math up and going, so we're looking to hire 2 math coaches to work with our elementary students in the very important subject of math as well. So we have a summer program that we have in place that started today. We have services happening during the day, and hopefully maybe some after school during the year next year. We saw a lot of our students do better than most who normally do well. So we feel really good about the majority of our students making benchmark, but we do see cases where students who have had a hard time in the past, that gap has widened a little bit. So we are focusing on those students who have had a little bit more of a gap than normal. And so we're going to try to support them in those students.
In fall, are you anticipating like reopening of the school? Are you anticipating following the guidelines as mandated by the state, or especially for the elementary level kids that are under 12 who may not be vaccinated at that time? Are you anticipating?
We are, yeah. We actually called the state today to see if they had any updated guidance, because the guidance has changed by DESE more than a few times. And
yeah,
we have said out loud that we are opening school. The state is not allowing hybrid learning or remote learning as part of their program. So we'll open full in person. I think some of the discussions that we're going to have in the month of August after DESE might come up with more guidance is whether we have students wear masks at the elementary level because they have not been vaccinated.
Yeah.
Whether we let students do that on their own, which they're welcome to do, obviously by the DESE standard, and whether Belmont will ask all families to have their children wear masks at the elementary level because no one's vaccinated, which would be an added measure that we would want to think about. So that's some of our thinking right now, but we will follow the DESE standards as we always have. We tried to rely on the CDC at the federal level and the Department of Public Health at the state level, and our own local health department with Wes Chin and the health team as our measurement of leaning on the experience and the health experts to make these decisions. And we'll continue to do that for next year as well. So we're going to open school. And we have met with our remote only families. We do know we have families out there that have hard situations medically, and we'll be looking to work with them. We had a group call with remote only families just about 10 days ago. We'll some of the work that we'll be trying to do for next year and listen to what their concerns were as well. Could you
debrief us about the funding and timeline and process for the West Harris Field, the Scheme 2 that was approved?
So I believe at one of the meetings that we had in May, the school committee decided to move forward with identifying how they could replace the rink, and that they would leave the fields, west field and west of the rink, the same for now. That at town meeting, after those meetings with the school committee, town meeting did vote the one extra tennis court for the Winbrook. So the team would be able to have a place to play and hold events. And I think West of Harris Field and the ice rink is going to be a process that will take another year or so to develop and come together, because it needs a plan, it needs funding from the town, and both of those things aren't in place yet. So the work that's been done right now has been very preliminary, and I think there's going to be a lot of work moving forward.
As you wrap up today's interview, Superintendent Phelan, we started off with you reminiscing about the pandemic, and I want to ask you a question wrapping up the interview. What might be your one personal victory of this period and one personal regret?
So my regret would be that, as always, you can communicate more. And I know that some people might not have agreed with the decisions that were made. I think at one point during the year, we knew that no matter what we chose, everybody was split into thirds. So we could make a decision and have 2/3 of the families not being supportive. And then if we made another decision, it would kind of rotate a little bit. So we were aware that we were making hard decisions based on what we thought were the right facts at the right time and the right guidance. But you can always communicate better. You can always let people know why you're doing something, give them the rationale, and hope that they can either agree or understand why you're taking the next steps that you are. So, my regret is not being able to communicate better during this really hard time. The thing that I walk away with as somewhat of an accomplishment is that we held school for our students who had most challenged starting on the first day of school. Our special education students were back in school full time. Our medical families, our families that were underserved, were back in school the majority of the fall through the year. We fed families all last summer through COVID, and we provided lunch for free all year for all of our families. So I think that we really tried to pay attention to our most vulnerable groups that we work with, and that we made it through the school year without having to cancel school for any health reasons, conservative with our health precautions and mitigations, which some people I think felt we could have been a little more liberal on, but we didn't have anybody get sick. We didn't have to cancel school because of health. We kept our school community and our community at large healthy, and provided them, I would say, on average with everybody around us, the same type of teaching and learning work that other districts were able to provide. And we got through the year intact. And so could we have done better? I'm sure we could have done better in a couple of different spots. There's no doubt about it. But I'm glad that we were able to keep everybody safe and healthy, and move through the year with the academic progress that we made moving into next school year. And we ended better than we started, and we'll start next year better than we ended, and we'll get better every month.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today and tackling and answering some very thorny issues and relevant issues and important issues for our community and our students. We thank you for your time with us today, and hopefully we'll connect again soon in even better circumstances.
That sounds great. I'll come back anytime. We have a great opening of a brand new school in September, so maybe we'll get together in September and we can talk about that on the show. It'll be a great topic.
That's definitely an exciting step. This is Shonul Malik, your host, signing off, and I'll see you again next time.